This podcast was sponsored by and recorded at Crossings Pub and Eatery on Hyde Park.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're finding us in the virtual world. We welcome you again to another edition of the Vicars Crossing podcast, a chance where we get together every week or two to chat and spend time with each other here at Crossings Pub and Eatery on Hyde Park Road in London, and a virtual space where faith intersects with the public square. My name is Rob Henderson, and I'm the rector at Holy Trinity St. Stephen's Memorial Anglican Church, the big blue church in the corner of Southdale and Wellington in London. Can't miss it. And I'm here back again with Kevin. Hi.
I'm Kevin, and I'm from St. Aidan's Church in the northwest corner of London, Ontario.
Can't miss it.
Always happy to be back to get us together.
All right, good. Yeah,
we have another guy with us today, too.
We got another guy with us.
We have Greg Smith, or probably should call him Canon Greg Smith, because he's a canon, which is very important. Just by way of introduction, some of you are from the London area, or at least connected to the Anglican Church, will know Greg because he's been around forever, and he's.
And he appreciated
that
comment. Given in love.
So Greg, of late though, joined the Faculty of Theology at Huron University College at Western as the Director of Field Ed in July of 2013. And over there, he's hanging out with responsibilities that bring him into daily association with students preparing for ministry within the Anglican Church, as well as other denominational and faith traditions. Greg has been ordained, as I said, a long time, 1978.
Wow.
Greg, I was 7 in 1978. How old were you, Rob?
I was 12.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah,
So,
11,
well,
12.
we were just kidlets.
Yeah.
And he was priested in 79 under the authority of the Bishop of Huron. Very important that it was under the authority. And since then, he's served just about everything. He's been a priest in 4 parishes, a director of diocesan camp. He's supervised tons of students in practicum placements. He's served on diocesan national committees in the church, including his current work, which is part of the reason we wanted to have him here today, as the representative for our Huron Diocese to the Primate's World Relief and Development Fund, or as we call it, PWRDF. And so he's been on boards local and in the wider community working with Primate's World Relief, and he's had the opportunity to visit agricultural projects in Cuba and democracy and advocacy projects in El Salvador. So Greg has 3 adult children, 6 grandchildren. He lives in London with his partner of 12 years, Mark Smith, who's a musician and accompanist and choral director in London. Connected to our guest last week, because he plays with, he works in ministry with David Exley at Riverside United. Yeah. And also Greg is the one of the honorary assistants at St. Aidan's Church, so he gets to hang out with us.
So you bump into him once in a while.
He does incredible worship work as well as the chair of our worship team. So we're just pleased to have you with us. Welcome, Greg.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Happy St. Nicholas Day.
Yes,
yeah, happy
indeed.
St. Nicholas Day.
We're recording on St. Nicholas Day.
On a snowy Thursday today.
Right, and we're recording as well on the 5th day of Hanukkah, so we wish a Hanukkah blessing to all our Jewish listeners.
Yeah. I got to add one thing to your resume, too, that I got to make public, that Greg was very influential in my formation.
Oh.
Yes, because
because
just after you got ordained, a year or 2 after, as Kevin said, you were taking the job of director of Huron Church Camp. And a 14-year-old pimply-faced Rob Henderson, who had nothing to do that summer, and whose grandmother told him, "You need to go to Huron Church Camp." And he fought it and fought it and fought it. But Greg interviewed me and hired me for a few weeks in the summer.
You gave him a job?
Gave me a job at 14 years old. And I always, if I hadn't have gone, honestly, if I hadn't have gone up there that summer, I would have been running with another crowd that probably wouldn't have worked out too well. So I was one of those.
Could have been a lot more interesting, though.
Yeah, it could have been. I could have had a lot of other stories. But, at 14 years old, things are kind of wacky. And there I ended up here in church camp, and it gave me my first real introduction into Christian community and into the church, and
that's
started
fantastic.
That. So
Greg, you were a good leader, too.
Influential about that.
Good cabin leader.
Yeah, well, I had great
I
years
recall.
there. So.
Yeah, and now and it's interesting, the generational stuff, too, because then your kids have both been involved at the camp.
Yeah, they've been working there. My youngest is 20 this year. He was there last year, and it's probably his last year, but they've been there since they were 9 or 10 years old.
Right. So the camp's been doing a lot of good work for a lot
Very
of
much
years.
so.
Perhaps
Very
one
much so.
time in the spring, as we get closer to it, we need to get the director on here, Jerry Adam.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should do
have
that.
a conversation
Yeah, I'd
about
like to.
Huron
Quite
Church Camp.
stunning, the number of people that worked at camp who've gone into ministry.
It's amazing,
in one
isn't it?
form or
Yeah.
another.
It is amazing, yeah, and are still involved in the church in some capacity, and
Yep.
and the friendships that I mean, the people that I met there when I was 14 or 15.
Yeah.
When I talk about friends I have, those are still the
Interesting. Isn't that
closest
wonderful?
ones. Those are still the ones, no matter where they are,
Yeah.
that we touch base with, and we have lunch together once a year, and yeah, so it was a great formative experience, and I'm always thankful that he said, yeah, you can come up more, Kerry.
Good stuff.
Which, by the way, I never got paid. I think I got about $10 a week in candy my first week. But it was all good. It was all good.
Well, not everything is for pay, Rob.
Well, yes, I understand that.
Do it for Jesus.
Do it for Jesus. Good. So what's been going on over at St. Aidan's?
Well, we've been, cooking along with Advent. We had an incredible, a really good preacher on Sunday in Greg Smith.
Oh, well, there you go.
And
Well, isn't that a coincidence?
it is too, yeah. It was a neat Sunday because being the first Sunday of Advent, it was sort of a gathering at the, this is, those of you who are church related will notice the beginning of the liturgical year for us. And we had a gathering activity which Greg coordinates at the beginning of church with everybody bringing greenery to the Advent wreath. And while we sang Prepare the Way of the Lord, it was really quite moving. It was a beautiful experience to see the whole community from our youngest members to our eldest members. And in fact, one of our very eldest members, Greg, had her stay up and light the wreath. So it was just
nice.
a really special thing. And the other stuff we're doing is I've been trying to publish on a weekly basis a sort of an Advent kindness calendar. We used to get those silly Advent calendars that you crack open and get your chocolate.
yeah.
So I've been posting on social media every day a different act of kindness that we might get engaged in to sort of call ourselves into action and community with how we exercise our spirituality through this time of preparation and waiting. So that's what we've been up to. What about you? What's going on
Well,
at
we're
Holy
looking
Trinity
forward to
St.
this Sunday,
Stephen's?
really, because, and I was just chatting with Greg about it before we started the podcast, but this Sunday we've got a special guests coming in. It's a family musical group. They call themselves Winter Wheat. Kim and Dave are mom and dad and the kids, and they all play different instruments and a very musical family. And they've kind of made it one of their ministries to go to different places and offer their gift of music. So they're coming in on Sunday to lead us in music and worship. And of course, it's been our custom at the church to offer a gift to those that come in and do that. But they said, no, we don't want that, but we would like to have an opportunity to donate whatever you'd want to give us to some form of outreach. And so we decided a little over a week ago to give whatever we got that day to PWRDF, which is what Greg's going to talk about a bit more today, so I won't, get too ahead of ourselves. So I'm glad you're here today to kind of announce that, but we're looking forward to that this Sunday, and I know we're going to do well with that, and hopefully Greg can come over sometime down the road and collect the check and do that, so that'll be fun. So it's a good coincidence that we're all together today doing this, because this is coming up this Sunday.
Curious to know, too, what, for you, Greg, at the college right now, where the students are studying theology and preparing for, I guess, the end of the term, what's happening with you guys over there?
Well, tomorrow's the last day of classes.
Wow.
And then exams for 2 weeks for those who have them.
Yeah.
So it'll be a bit of a quiet place for the next couple of weeks. The rest of us, those on teaching faculty, of course, go into meeting mode for the next couple of weeks.
It's got to be the best part of your work.
I love the meetings. Can't get enough
Is
meetings.
this also the time where you chase people for papers? And
Oh, yeah.
yeah, I remember those days.
Yeah.
I was the one running away.
Oh, were you? Yeah. See, I was on the opposite end. I was the goofball that always had to have it in a week before because I was so worried about everything, and the
What an
professor
arse.
would hand it back
You're
to me.
the guys who make us look bad.
That was the idea. Yeah. But yeah, it's
What?
there's gonna be a quiet time over the next month, I'm sure. And
What about producer Ian? What do you got going on?
We're just preparing for concerts, and that's about it.
when are you guys done? Like when does the last day of school for?
Last day of school is the 21st.
Oh, so you're
Yeah.
pushing the envelope. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Well, we'll pray for you.
Good. We will.
That's what we do.
Well, that's what we do. Well, good. So, Yeah, Kevin, why don't we talk a little bit about
Want to talk about Advent or something?
Advent? We can do that. And I'm
get
seeing
on
on our cheat sheet here an author that I just am a big fan of that you,
Oh, yeah?
you were going to
I just
talk a bit
discovered her,
about.
actually.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah, I don't know where I came across it, probably somewhere on social media, somebody posting a tweet or something, but Fleming Rutledge, I've been reading her most recent work about Advent. It's a collection of sermons of hers.
Yeah, it's just
and,
something that's come out, isn't it?
Yes, it's pretty new, and it's a very good book. I was reading in it this, and I just share with the listeners this particular piece that I read from one of her sermons for the first Sunday of Advent, where she writes, "For all of us who are here today getting ready for our worldly Christmas, let us make a place in our hearts for that strange, lonely sentinel on the frontier of the ages, still pointing away from himself to the one who is to come, identifying for us the place where we are to stand. We're not zombies here on earth. Let us be alive and alert. Whenever we do the right thing in spite of its cost, we are doing what Christian soldiers do. We are standing our ground. It may not be a very big piece of ground, but it is the one God has given us to hold, and it will be a part of God's new world in the great liberation. Let the news go forth. God is on the move. He is creating a new humanity. You and I belong to it. Let us honor the Master by holding our piece of territory and by remembering the needs of the least of these, the least of his brothers and sisters. Rejoice, rejoice, believe, and let your lights appear." Greg, I just wanted to get your reaction because I said earlier with a little bit of jest, but I had the chance to listen back to your sermon because we record them from Sunday. Your homily was incredible. And particularly as you ended it, and these words sort of echo it a little bit, is that notion of what God is promising to do and our willingness to hold out even in the void, sometimes in the difficult space. And I just wonder if you could share with us, Greg is, he doesn't say in his biography that he gives to us that he's a great liturgist, but he's a really good liturgist. And so just some conversation about this, perhaps as a way of sparking the conversation, but a chat about Advent in general.
Yeah, well, it reminds me kind of my whole ministry of trying to encourage congregational life to keep Advent before Christmas comes upon us. And I've been called many things by people in churches over the years, particularly Scrooge.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
that happens when you're saying, don't do that.
Don't do that yet.
It's just 4 weeks, but it's just, I think it's really an important gift of Christian spirituality, really, to keep Advent, to recognize that in Christian tradition, of course, we know that we believe, we hold that Jesus inaugurated the new reign of God by gathering communities of people who would live in justice, mercy, peace, and practice that. But we also know that that reign is not complete, and that we're looking for it. That's what Advent reminds us, that we're always looking towards that coming again of Christ, and that in the meantime, and we live in the meantime,
Right.
so that our work is to practice the kingdom until that kingdom fully comes, until God fully comes. And I just think it's important for us to practice that in an Advent time, and that gives us that waiting, that sense of waiting and expectation that motivates us to do those kind of acts of kindness that you're talking about, or acts of justice, acts of mercy, do those kinds of things that prepare the way.
Yes.
Because
So there can be real purposeful waiting, right?
Yeah.
It's not just waiting like
tapping your
waiting in
watch.
line and yeah, exactly. And,
When is this
and
gonna be
checking
over?
your phone to see if anybody texted you. But it's purposeful waiting. What are you going to do in that in between? Right?
Yeah. Well, it's no accident that the story around which we gather is about a woman who is pregnant and waiting for birth.
Yeah.
Right.
What's interesting is we hung a new altar hanging this year. We had a parishioner donate a new frontal. And between myself and Catherine Comer, who created it, we did some searching online and came up with different images. Really wanted to have Mary expecting, very pregnant. And of all the things that we've brought into the church, it's interesting to me the reaction that's come from this. It has been incredible, the number of people who've remarked about that hanging and how incredible it is. And at least 3 or 4 people I notice on social media, on Facebook, have changed their profile picture to be the picture of this expectant Mary who's hanging on the front of our altar. And that tells me something, right? Like there's a yearning, there's something really going on, I think, that's stirring within people, particularly as that sort of parallel season, I think, that's going on around us, this sort of commercial reality that happens. I think people are yearning for a sense of being able to enter into the mystery and awe of expecting, of waiting. And particularly some of the people who've spoken to me about it, some of the women of our parish who for the image has hearkened them back to the time of waiting for their children to be born. And that's given a new connection in terms of this year's Advent journey.
Yep.
So, I find it quite profound. You said something near the end of your sermon, and I'm not going to get it right now because I'm trying to do it from memory, and you might do the same. But it was around the acclamation that we make at the Eucharistic prayer. Christ has died, Christ has risen, Christ will come again. Greg said something like, Christ has died. The powers of violence and so on and so forth have done their way. Christ has risen. Christ has declared that death and darkness and the ways of the empire and violence have no dominion over us. And Christ will come again. We continue to be in that meantime that you spoke of, where we continue to wait to make the reign of God real.
Right.
That we make real the reality of a liberated people, of justice for all, of mercy and kindness, and a world where violence has no sway over us anymore. Now, I may be twisting your words wrong, so I'd invite you to
pretty close.
respond to that.
That's pretty close.
Yeah.
But I think the reality is we all, and maybe that's part of the reaction that you're talking about. I think particularly in this last year and a half or 2 years, I think many of us, even here in North America, have begun to really feel that this world has not done the work we have to do. It's just, in fact, the signs are everywhere that things are getting worse again between human beings. And that compels those of us who feel a vision of something better to work even harder and to know that we're in that meantime. It's a way off.
Yeah.
We have to look for it. We have to work towards it. We have to journey towards it. And it's not going to be easy. And I think that's one of the things, as I say, as you were talking about women in the parish thinking about their own pregnancies. Pregnancy is hardly ever a perfect time.
Right.
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 It can be pretty unpleasant.
Yeah.
There can be some real risks involved, and that's where we are in the world, is in that time. And so those of us who feel a calling towards something else, it's going to be a time of taking risks. There's going to be some pain involved and some real hard work involved to bring to birth what we look for.
And I think that, like, some of the discourse that you hear from people, who like to get all wound up about stuff that doesn't matter, like the war on Christmas, right?
So war on Christmas and red coffee cups.
Red coffee cups, and Starbucks not making them Christmassy enough. But I watched a video of a Jesuit priest speaking last night and talking about how that war on Christmas and that conversation about that whole business of can you say Merry Christmas and so on, it's a distraction. It's a diversion away from having to enter into that thing that we're talking about, that difficult void of having to do the work in the meantime. Because it's much easier to be indignant and say, oh, well, they don't let us say Merry Christmas. Who's ever told you not to say Merry Christmas is what I want to know. But it was quite good what he had to say, because I think that what he was striking at is at the very core of what this discussion is, which is there's lots to do. And we could be at that, or we could spend our time talking about whether or not we call it a holiday tree or a Christmas tree, and being very indignant that they don't call it a Christmas tree.
And that is another theme of Advent, if you will, because and this was a Fleming Rutledge quote as well, and it probably is from some of that Advent writing that she did, was that the thing that she really was stressing about Advent and why it's so different as a season from, say, Lent, is Advent is that one season where through our liturgy and our readings and the season itself, we point to and hold up what's wrong. It's like staring into the darkness, naming it.
Right.
You know, and it started last Sunday when we had
Right.
a reading in our lectionary about Jesus talking about the sun and the moon is going to collapse and
pretty
the
dark.
waves and the people scream. I mean, we do that, and then the John the Baptist.
John the
stuff,
Baptist,
and,
2 weeks
yeah.
of this now, it ain't pretty.
Right, exactly. So this whole season is about saying this is what's dark, this is what's wrong,
Yeah.
and to look into it, while at the same time understanding that there's something coming out of that because God's in that darkness, within that, building
Right.
something, growing something, transforming,
Yeah.
working, and that's why it's so powerful.
Yeah. One of the other books that we've been looking at is Barbara Brown Taylor's Learning to Walk in the Dark.
Oh yeah,
And that actually speaks to that theme as well. Just brought up the title to the book we're trying to remember by Fleming Rutledge, for those who are listening. It's called Advent, the Once and Future Coming of Jesus Christ. And if you're in the church world, church leadership world, and you preach and you lead worship, I'd encourage you to get it and read it. She's got some pretty interesting things to say in all those, I think, 30 years of preaching or something
oh
like
yeah,
that. So.
yeah. Great background. Good, good. Well, let's flip the switch a little bit, and I wanted to chat with Greg about. It seems seminary to me was 10, 11 years ago. It seems like forever, but at the same time, only yesterday.
How long was yours, Greg?
Yeah, we already did that at the
already
beginning.
told them
Yeah,
that.
we did that at the beginning.
30,
Kevin.
how many years
Yeah.
ago? 30? 1978 was what now? Yeah.
He keeps bringing that up. What's going on?
He's so old, never mind.
Well, one of Greg's roles and one of the many hats he wears is as Director of Field Education at Huron College here in London. And in that role, of course, you spend a lot of time with students who are studying to take on a variety of different ministries in the Christian church. So, you know, part of our podcast here at the Vicars Crossing, we're focusing on ways at how our faith intersects with the public square. And we like to discuss where faith and the public square intersect. So is that part of the formation for students of theology at Huron? Are those conversations that are purposeful and brought into the classroom about how they're going to exist in that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, one of the formal elements that the Faculty of Theology at Huron supports is a Center for Public Theology, which tries to have an event almost once a year or something which gathers theologians and scholars and the public in to talk about significant issues to our times. And I think upcoming, there's one plan to address mental health issues,
Wow.
and then there's another one planned to address medically assisted death. And
Okay.
so those are the kinds of things that's something formal that through Gary Badcock as the sort of chair of that
Oh, wow.
group, and
Yeah.
I know we've just received a grant from the Anglican Foundation for one of those events coming up.
Fantastic.
Yeah, but certainly in classes, students get engaged in the public sphere all the time. I think,
Sure.
and particularly in my class, field education is one of those things where students are out in practicum placements, and more we're seeing students that are looking at placements that are alternatives to congregational life. For
Okay.
example, I've got
Yeah.
this year I had a couple of students engaged with what would I call it? Prison ministry and post prison ministry, people who have been incarcerated and have been released, and
Leonard's
how
House type thing?
they
Yeah.
re-engage, and what can be the the role of faith communities in helping people rebuild their lives after those kinds of experiences. I have another student who's placed at Parkwood Hospital in the Veterans Care and Rehabilitation units, so engaging her faith perspective in the realities of people's lives. And certainly in the curriculum in my classroom, we make sure that students have time to spend in that significant issue of Canadian society these days with truth and reconciliation,
Right.
and how we're engaging in our relationship with the Indigenous people of this country. Mental health is always part of the curriculum, global issues, how we engage with the issues that that are much bigger than just ourselves here in North America. And I know in the liturgical studies end of things too, there's a significant part put aside for students to engage with the role of public ritual.
Oh, okay.
And not just stuff we do in churches, but
Right.
those moments when the public itself needs to come together, like Remembrance Day and other moments
Right.
that,
Or when we gather at a mosque or a synagogue after a
Exactly.
tragedy, or a
Exactly.
church after a tragedy.
yeah, and that's one of the reasons why too, we make sure that there are opportunities for students our students particularly, to gather at those things. For example, the last one was
Yeah.
with the shooting at the synagogue in Pittsburgh, and a number of students gathered
Indeed.
at the synagogue, and the year before
At the mosque.
at the mosque, when you worked with the imam to have that public moment, we made sure we walked,
Yeah.
a group of us walked down from the college to be part of that. So yeah, I mean, I want to say,
Yeah,
that
sounds
for
like it.
most of us, this is a really significant, important part of.
Do you find students that have come into Huron and started their theological studies kind of had this interest and passion before they stepped in, or as part of their studies and their growth in understanding theological studies has perhaps kind of pushed them toward that a little bit? I mean, do you find a change in that at all, or were they kind of into it before they got here?
I'm certainly finding that with the present student body that I'm working with now, that most of these students have been fired up because of justice.
Okay, yeah,
Right.
so they're coming in with
the
that, yeah.
connection between faith and justice is pretty strong for them all, and that has given them the reason, and I can identify with that to engage in leadership. This is
Right.
important.
Do you find that particularly with the younger ones?
Mm-hmm.
See, it's interesting because last week we were, on our last podcast, the listeners who listen to this will remember we were talking about the Angus Reid poll, which came out and it talked about faith in the public square, and that those who are most, who advocate most for religious involvement in whatever aspect tend to be young, educated, and well dug in. They may not be religious in some cases, but they actually care deeply about the role of religion.
Yep.
And how it affects society. And so it's interesting to me that some of the people who are coming, who are studying on a postulancy or for ordination, are engaged in that too, right? Like
Yeah.
they're there, right?
Yeah.
They see that connection between the two things.
And I just am so delighted to be part of the fabric this year, particularly
Yeah.
with that kind of shift in people. And I just want to make sure that people understand that part of our student body is also Muslim.
Yes.
And so
Yeah.
it's not just a Christian student body at this point in time. And that's my first year class this year. Had a couple of Muslim students in that
Yeah.
class, and it was the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, our faith needs to have an impact on how we live together on this earth.
Right.
And said
And
quite
even-
publicly, and that exchange of those kinds of ideas is so stimulating.
Incredible out there. You have Dr. Ingrid Mattson, right?
Yep.
And she does an incredible job.
Oh,
there,
yes,
too.
yeah, she's world
Renowned. This is hopeful what I hear Greg saying.
Oh, yeah,
because,
very
I mean, I
much
think
so,
that
very much
because
so.
when I think back, my experience is over 20 years ago. I came to Huron College from the Holy Land of Newfoundland 24 years ago, and I was not engaged in these things, right? Like part of it was a product of growing up in a more sheltered environment, but the other part of it is I'm not sure we understood, at least as I learned the church, I didn't necessarily learn the church's role in terms of the public discourse and having a voice. In fact, I suppose if I'm thinking about it and being really honest about it, I guess I would have to say that I thought, I guess innately I probably saw the church as a part of the establishment.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think that now we're regaining our voice to say that we're not a part of the empire.
I was sharing with the first years the other day, but in my long ministry, as you pointed out,
A few times, Kevin.
Sorry, I wasn't going to say anything again.
I've seen several metaphors for the transition of several metaphors for the church.
Yeah.
And I think my earliest memory is talking about Exodus. Like, we're leaving where we were. And then it was wilderness wandering, and you don't know what's next and all that kind of thing. And then it was exile. So we're on the margins of everything now. We've been kicked out of mainstream society.
Yeah.
and we're kind of huddling together to try and survive and figure out. And now it's returning from exile,
Yes.
and how do we rebuild and see and recognizing. And I think you're quite right. I think this is an age in which, once again, we understand that we have a significant calling and a significant role with the whole world, and we need to be engaged in a dialogue with the whole world. It's not just us and them.
Right.
It's all of us together in this, and we have something to say that we feel is important, and there's a memory
Right.
that we bring.
How can we sing the Lord's song in a strange land?
Right. Yeah.
You know, because I think that I think that's quite profound, actually, that whole journey there, away and back. And I think that as it relates to sort of the scriptural text, it's that reality of, if we're coming back, and now we've come back to this land from exile. And I think that in some ways we are trying to figure out how to sing the Lord's song in a strange land, right? Because if we come to grips with what this in-between time is, to go back to the Advent thing, and we know that the way we live is somehow countercultural to us there, how do we live in that tension?
Yeah, and we can't just rebuild what
No, you can't.
was.
No.
Right.
No.
But we have important memories that we bring with us.
Right.
And these are the times when we are asked what is really, really important. And that's we've been hearing the readings from Zechariah in
Yes.
every morning and in this season. And man, some of those things are hard to hear.
Are
But
hard
what
to
I
hear.
think what the prophet's saying there is, look, what's important now? You're coming back, because he
Yeah.
was a
Right.
prophet of the return, And
Yeah.
like, let's just get down to the nitty gritty here.
Right.
And a lot of that is about how you treat one another,
Right.
and how we engage in the feeding of widows and orphans and all of that kind of
Right.
imagery that he uses to talk about the restoration of human life together. And I
Right.
think
It's
that's what
relational.
we're-
Yeah. Now, part of how we live that relational reality is relative to the other work, the other hat that you wear, so to speak, one of the many that you wear in this diocese and as part of the country and the church. You are our representative on the Primate's World Relief and Development Fund. And so I'm just wondering if perhaps you might share some of your experience in that role in the broader context of what, for a lot of people who may not be Anglican, it's a big mouthful of letters, PWRDF, Primate's World Relief and Development Fund. It's I wonder if you can explain what that is, because some people who listen to us won't know what that is, why it's important, and the kind of work that it's doing.
Yeah. I should probably say first off the bat that the Primate in Primate's World Relief and Development Fund is a chief archbishop of the Canadian Anglican Church.
It's not an ape?
It's not.
It's not an ape.
No,
It's not an ape.
No.
a primate.
No,
It is,
we don't.
is,
we
is
don't
what
do
the
that.
Anglican Communion calls the national bishops. And our primate, Fred Hiltz, has been really, really engaged
Yes, he has.
with the work of the Primate's World Relief and Development Fund since in his time. So it is our version of World Relief and Development Organization, like many NGOs around the world that are working in different countries in partnership with community groups that have a need and have a plan for development and for transformation of the way things are, moving away from poverty and moving away from the kind of risks that people live with, moving away from food insecurity into a better life together. So the Primate, for short, we usually say the Primates Fund.
Yes, yeah.
And it was born out of actually the Nova Scotia coal mine disaster in 1953.
Wow. That was even before you, Greg.
No, that was my birth.
Oh, well, actually,
no, it was-
not before you.
No, it was 60 years ago. 60 years ago, sorry.
Okay.
It was 55 or 60.
55.
This is your part of the country.
No,
but you don't
I'm
know.
from further east.
Okay.
I'm closer
But
to the Holy
anyway,
Land.
At that time, Canadian Anglicans wanted to help.
Yes.
And it was the first disaster in Canada that was broadcast by radio.
Right,
So,
so
everybody
everybody,
knew
yep.
what was happening, and everybody was listening and wanted to be somehow helpful. And people contributed money, and the church said we need to be organized to try and work with this. So, and simultaneously, I think there was a refugee crisis of Hungarian refugees coming. And so this was our work. And so for 60 years. This coming year is going to be the 60th anniversary, 2019, and we've been working in several countries and in Canada itself with particular Indigenous communities in Canada in relief and development. We work in some emergency situations, which is the relief part.
Yeah.
And then we work in several more areas helping people transition the way things are, as I said before, in many countries. So I think we're working in about 30 different countries in the world and in Canada as well.
Wow.
And it's we hear a lot, of course, because of TV and media, about things like World Vision and large organizations that are either secular or in some ways connected to Christianity, but operate sort of on their own independently. Is there something that defines or makes primates different than all of that?
One of the things is that our promotion and education happens with a completely volunteer network.
Right. We have the church.
So we use
right?
the churches themselves, and we have local volunteers in in almost every church that works as a representative for us. And then I'm a diocesan representative, so I go and learn about the work, and then I bring that back and share that with my deanery representatives.
There's a network there,
who then
ready-made
go back
network.
And none of us are paid for the work we do. It's all volunteer time, and so that that's one of the big things about the support and promotion of the work that we do, so that we don't spend a lot of money on promotion. The money that we raise and are able to raise goes, a great percentage of that goes direct to the projects themselves. Right. Of course, there is a staff in Toronto. We also don't send paid employees out into the field.
Right.
Our only paid staff work in Toronto, and they work as links to our partners, who are mostly local, small groups of people, often again working through church organizations that know what is needed in the area and are equipped to put people into action once they get the support. Our job is to support them and to help them, provide them with some knowledge of oversight. And in particular, where there are projects that are also matched by the Canadian government, there are certain
so you get those matching
accountability procedures that they have to follow. So we help them make sure that they are able to do that. And
one of the things I learned at the beginning when I was learning more about PWRDF, because oftentimes we see these natural disasters occur in other parts of the world, whether they be tsunamis or earthquakes or whatever it is. But my understanding is PWRDF is already there and ready to go in a sense when these things happen. So
through our partnerships, we have a
right.
network of partnerships,
Right.
and there's an organization called Action of Churches Together who are a network of people all around the world, and we keep there's an emergency fund that all these organizations contribute to, so
Right.
that money can immediately be shipped into these areas to support these local organizations that will be on the ground and responding immediately in these places.
So important to keep that in mind, because oftentimes these things happen and we think, oh no, I got to start sending my money over to these different parts of the world. But contributing and being a supporter of PWRDF, however you want to do that through the year, continues to ensure that help is taken care of when it's needed in the moment.
And we are able to, because of the structure of our organization, that in emergency situations, when people do donate towards an emergency, 100% of that donation goes to the emergency.
Right.
It doesn't go to pay for the other.
We've had some of those in country, right? Like Fort McMurray.
Yes, we have.
The fires and
Mostly fires, but also flooding in Calgary area a few years ago.
Right.
Where we've been able to be. And that's, of course, happening more and more as climate
change.
changes.
Yeah.
We actually now have an emergency protocol in place so that local dioceses in Canada themselves can now work alongside the Primates Fund, and the Primates Fund can help them get the structure in place if people want to donate to places. And
So for those listening in today, Greg, how can people give? Where do they go, and how can they find out more and support this if they so choose?
well, we've just had a massive upgrade of our website, so please go to the website, PWRDF.org, and all the stories there. It has many menus to come, pull down and find. There's actual stories, there's description of the work, there's the financial accounting, et cetera, and always is everywhere there is a place to donate on that page.
What if you wanted to get like a Hanukkah gift or a Christian gift for somebody at Christmas? Can you do that on
Yes,
there?
you can.
Yeah.
There is one of the things you can pull down is something called the World of Gifts, which makes available. It describes different projects with a financial sort of target that will help these projects happen.
Yeah.
They provide a little explanation of how the money would be put to work.
So I can get a goat?
You can. Livestock is one of the things that
I want some livestock.
Get yourself a goat,
can
Kevin.
be. You can even. I have a church in London actually, whose the church school is their Epiphany project after Christmas is going to be to raise enough for a whole farm.
Oh,
wow.
It's designated in here as $470, I think it is.
Oh, you can get a
Oh,
whole
look at
farm.
that. They got the
Whole
whole
farm,
list
buy
of
the whole
everything
farm.
there.
Yeah, you got to get on these web pages, folks.
Yeah,
That's great. No,
We'll
that's
make
good
sure we
stuff.
got that on our on this podcast too.
And I can tell you too that oftentimes, if you're listening and you're involved in an Anglican parish, a good question to ask your rector is, do we have a PWRDF rep in our parish?
Yeah.
Right? Because that's where I started to learn more
we-
about
we
it.
have one. His
And
name is
we
Greg.
have one. Yeah, yeah, we have one. His name is Greg. Thanks a lot. No, we have one too. Her name is Linda. And she
Yeah,
does
that's
wonderful
right.
work. And
That's right.
But no, it's so important for those in our parish to be able to connect to this too and know what's going on. So.
So this project you've got going on the weekend, or coming up here, not this
Yeah,
weekend, is it?
Sunday.
Sunday,
It's
this Sunday,
Yeah. So we have this family coming in, and they're going to offer the music for us, and
Yeah.
we're going to ask the congregation to support them, and what they take in will be matched, and we're going to give all that to PWRDF.
Open to the
so-
public as well?
Oh, of course, yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah.
when is it happening?
Sunday morning at 10:30
Yeah.
at Holy Trinity St. Stephen's, the big blue church in the corner of Southdale and Wellington.
Think Rona,
That's the
folks,
best
and
way.
you'll see it.
Best way to find us. Yeah, we're right there in the corner. So yeah, 10:30
It's the same
worship.
color
and
as Rona.
We'll get it, and
Yeah.
we'll that's right. Yeah, but we're open.
Yes,
and we're
they're open.
staying
They're open and they're staying
That's
open.
right.
Yeah.
And no,
We're
so
back, baby.
Be more than welcome to come on out and listen to this wonderful family.
I'm
on
just
Sunday.
wondering too with Greg, if perhaps before we wind things down, if you could share a little bit of, you've had a couple of really good experiences. I mean, I know you've been to El Salvador and you've been to Cuba. Perhaps if there's one experience you can think of your trip, out of those trips that you made, that would give some sense to the listeners about what you encounter when you're there and how important this work is.
Oh gosh, yeah. Both of those trips, as whenever somebody from North America travels to actually engage with people in other countries, it makes a change in your life. I guess in terms of Cuba, for example, we visited our agricultural partners there, and I had no idea of the devastation that Cuba had faced with their recent history. I really wasn't aware of how that all has affected with the pullout of the Russians and the American embargo and then hurricanes.
Yes.
So that, and the reality that even though it's a tropical country, many people have forgotten how to grow food,
Right.
and how to produce their own food, and had become dependent. So that people coming to the cities away from the countryside. So just being there with them and seeing how local church communities themselves are helping people rediscover the joys of agriculture. It's
Right,
just that, like, there's space being used around churches now. We've got all this space. Let's grow a town garden. And in many of the little villages, the churches have become the partners with the communities in rediscovering agriculture, rediscovering preserving for the off seasons. And in fact, the government has communist government has recently recognized the contribution of the churches, and now they recognize that they are actually a partner with them in redeveloping the country.
It's a good development.
And the gratitude of the local people of being able to do this work themselves, and the gratitude to us as an organization and to all of us who come together. I mean, we're not the only organization there, that's for sure.
No.
But to the gratitude for making this a possibility, and for them, because it becomes sustainable because they learn how to do it.
Yes.
And that's the exciting thing about it all. And
That's great.
Yeah.
I think that's, the important part of that too is that for so many of us, at least who have an Anglican background, those of you who are listening, will know that, you may put your money in your blue PWRDF envelope, or you may be the person who goes online and clicks a donation. And you might not understand sort of the impact of that. And for those who are fortunate enough to go, and I believe it is sort of a gift to be able to go and experience that.
Oh, yeah.
But it means taking on some of the pain that you see in that too. But I think it's important for people to know.
That's good.
Well, I think we're getting near the end here, because my Sons of Kent, I should say we're drinking.
Yeah, I
Sons
was
of
going to
Kent.
mention that
My
too,
Sons
as
of
we
Kent is
enjoy our
empty.
time at Crossings with
Yeah.
the delicious Sons of Kent.
Sons
from
of Kent,
Chatham.
good job, boys. Keep bringing those beverages from Chatham, Kent.
We love it.
Yeah.
We love it. And Greg, can't thank you enough for coming in and sharing your
Thanks for
work, your
having me.
ministry, the information on PWRDF and our alma mater, Huron College, and all that other good stuff. And I must say, I'm much happier knowing and more at peace knowing that you're around Kevin on hopefully a daily basis, because on his own, like we were just talking
Very
trouble here.
responsible.
So it's nice to know
Yeah,
that
being
somebody's
monitored.
taking,
I'm being monitored.
being monitored.
Ian, do you have anything to add to this august conversation?
Nope.
No?
Short and sweet, to the point. I like it.
Well, any reflection on the fact that Rob feels happy that I'm being monitored by Greg on a near daily basis?
I kind of agree with him. You should
Thank
probably
you,
have
Ian.
someone looking out for you.
Reel them in every
Reel it in. Yeah, exactly.
We all need a little something.
Well, thanks to Greg, thanks to Revy Kevy, thanks to producer Ian once again for hitting all the right buttons and keeping us on the air as he does so well. And my name is Rob Henderson. We look forward to chatting with you again next time on the Vicars Crossing from Crossings Pub and Eatery on Hyde Park Road in London. And until we get together, once again, don't forget to look both ways.
Before you cross the street.
Thank you for listening. Our hosts are Kevin George and Rob Henderson. Our producer and composer is myself, Ian, with original artwork done by Catherine Olenek. If you have any questions or want to know how to find us, tweet us at Vicars Crossing or find us on Facebook at The Vicars Crossing. If you have any other questions about anything heard on this podcast, leave us a comment or look in the description to find out more. Thanks!